Repetitive.
Not the first time I've been told I'm repetitive. I think we're live now. Hey, thanks for joining us in celebration of World Poetry Day. The us, it's not me, it's poets Larry Beckett and August Gladstone, who will spend the next 90 minutes talking about poetry, maybe reading or I guess performing some poetry, and certainly reminding us of how poetry can help define our lives. Larry's poetry ranges from songs like Song to the Siren, blank sonnets such as those in his book Songs and Sonnets, to the epic American Cycle, which includes Paul Bunyan, Wyatt Earp, Amelia Earhart, and 7 other book-length poems. The Book of Merlin is Larry's translation of the 6th century poet, and Beat Poetry is his study of the poets and poetry of the 50s San Francisco Renaissance. August Gladstone is, on this date in 2025, a 24-year-old writer, poet, and troubadour. An award winning poet, he's been published by Palante, Lothlorien Poetry Journal, Winged Moon, Vine Leaves Press, and many more. As a lyricist, he's written for members of Supertramp, Crowded House, and Ringo's All Stars. August's debut collection of poetry is completed and In Search of a Home. But here today, poetry's home is in the hearts and minds of each of us. So, with that, let's welcome Larry Beckett and August Gladstone.
Hey,
Thank you so much, Lou.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you, guys. So, I guess we're just going to go ahead and start. Do you want to start with conversations or with poetry?
now we're gonna converse and do the poetry at the end.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Okay, well, I'm just going to
So
blank space myself out here. You kids have fun.
okay. Hey, welcome to World Poetry Day. Or as I like to call it, dude, where's my iambic pentameter? It was created by the United Nations, actually UNESCO, in order to, quote, promote linguistic diversity, to use poetry to do that. And so that tells me that the whole thing that happened at the Tower of Babel is okay by them. And and the other thing is that they're using poetry. Diversity is what their core value is, and they're using poetry to increase the respect for diversity. But that to me is like using a Mozart piano sonata to promote hot dogs. The hot dogs are not the point. So I don't think poetry
I think hot dogs are always the point.
Poetry is not something to use, it's an end in itself.
I think that's a remarkable way of framing it. And I've been putting a lot of thought into what I could possibly have to say about poetry as a baby in this world, really. And I'm looking forward to asking you, Larry, and figuring out some of your insights on it. But largely what I've been able to come to terms with is that it's something that's pretty unquantifiable. I've in all of my times trying to figure out what it means, I don't necessarily think it means anything, but at the same time, I think it means everything. Like how would you
really healthy attitude? You know, I've thought about this. People have spent centuries trying to define poetry, but I feel that the act of definition is limiting. That let's say you have a really robust, beautifully detailed and articulated definition of poetry, then all the other kinds of poetry that are outside that definition are now dead, as far as you're concerned. So
that's exactly right.
We want them to be alive. We want all those possibilities. I mean, even visual poetry and pure sound poetry and things like that, they have a place too. And so I think rather than define poetry, all I do is read a lot of it and internalize it. It's something that's not computable, and but you can get on the river of intuition.
Yeah, what I kept coming back to when I was trying to figure out, because I was trying to be like, for the uninitiated, is it writing with rhythm? Is it musical language? No, it's bigger than that, and there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
And what I kept coming back to is that you kind of just know it when you see it. And for that, I think it's as pure an art form as one can find. And I think that the nature of art, not to immediately jump into the deep end with you, but the nature of art is to translate something that is undefinable into something that is understandable. And poetry, I think, does that so well because of how broad it is, because it can take on these many forms, from, Homer and the Odyssey, and an act of oral storytelling that was existing before the written word, up until, the beats and modern songwriters. And now we're moving into the world of insta poetry, and this very bite-sized conversational style of poetry. And for a while, I was of the belief that there's no such thing as bad poetry. I think that anyone who is writing poetry with intent is a poet, and anyone who is a poet writes good poetry. As I've read more poetry, that opinion has shattered. But I do think that there is a way to sort of, as long as a poem is attempting to reach outside of ourselves and into that sphere of spirituality and artistry, and then translating it back to us, it is a worthwhile endeavor.
Well, there's the pleasure of its beauty, which is in part a sensual pleasure and in part an intellectual pleasure. Actually, it integrates the body and the mind. I don't think it has to be more than that. And as for creating a matrix of something understandable, to me, a primary aspect of the universe is its mystery, and I think that great art also conveys that mystery, not something that can be understood, but can be confronted and appreciated. Art is other than nature in that it's a human universe, more delectable by us as readers.
It's the world as filtered through the eyes of man, and it helps to give form to something that is intrinsically undefinable. And I think that's why it's such an important thing, especially right now in the world that we're living in, where so much of the arts and the humanities and those elements of goodness are being hamstrung, that having something to give face to those feelings of hopelessness is important now more than ever.
Yeah. And I liked your comment about poetry as authentic connection in a kind of a disconnected world. I mean, you and I have never even met yet. We need to take care of that. Maybe we could arrange a double reading up here in Portland, and I know we can do one in LA.
Either or. I'll drive up on the coast and just have a real grand time.
But real poetry is you standing next to the poet and the poet reciting the poem in your ear.
Sensual indeed, Mr. Beckett. Sensual indeed.
Yeah. And that is that is really old school. That's Homer. And Shakespeare, the words out loud as read by the author.
Yeah.
That's
I think that aspect of it goes hand in hand, especially when you bring up Shakespeare and Homer, who are as much poets as they are storytellers. That is an element of poetry that in modern poetry I find to be lacking in the zeitgeist of it all.
Yeah.
I think that that poetry has shifted very far towards pathos and very far towards translation of emotion, which is an important and valuable form of poetry, but it leaves storytelling style poetry. And I believe that storytelling poetry is also folk poetry.
Yeah.
I feel like they have been underutilized in modern times. And that was one of the first things that really drew me to your work and inspired me to what you do, and made me want to become a poet like you. Because if you look at your body of work, so much of it is based around mythology and modern American mythology, but even drawing back to your influences in Shakespeare and Goethe and fantastical stories of the Middle Ages. And I feel like you've done such an excellent job of bringing those stories into modern poetic forms. And could you talk on that a little bit about what inspires you?
There's there's a thing called poetic fashion, and it's really harsh in that like a herd of critics turns against some form of poetry, and you're just damned if you try to publish this stuff. They just laugh at you. So, for example, around the turn of the century, as modernism is ramping up, narrative poetry in general, like book-length poems that were fashionable, like with Longfellow in the 19th century, go completely out of style. The 20th century, what's hip is fragments, like The Wasteland, things like that, and cantos. And that lasted for a long time, and people just stopped after some half-hearted attempts by Robert Frost. They just stopped writing narrative poetry because they would just be laughed out of the room. So, but when I started to work, I looked at this poetic fashion. Also, there was a fashion for poetry that was thin, like not very musical, not very rich, not like lacking the crazy abundance of the Elizabethan poets, especially Shakespeare. I loved him, and I didn't like this thin poetry, and I did like narrative poetry. So I couldn't have been more out of fashion. But thanks to a miserable upbringing, I was a rebel with all causes. So I had no problem completely ignoring the literary fashion and hoping that if my art was good enough, that someday, it sounds like there's a race going on.
I'm in a drag racing neighborhood.
All right. So that someday that the pendulum would swing back, as it has, and this kind of work would be appreciated, and the literary fashion would turn out to have been a trivial event.
A couple things that really got my mind erasing. Abundance, I think, is such an important word that you just said, and such a valuable way to look at poetry. And for a long time, like me, I sort of found my way back into poetry because coming up in school, it never really attracted me. I don't think it attracted a lot of my peers. And I think the general consensus towards poetry from a lot of people of my age is that it could, be hard to get through, hard to understand, or solipsistic or pretentious or whatever it may be. But if you're a fan of something, of reading something and connecting something, I think abundance is such a wonderful way to look at it, because it's fallen so far into, let me put the fewest amount of words out there.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
let you gather your own inferences from it. But I feel like that does a disservice to language as a whole. Not to make something that's entirely word salad and garbled and vomit, but like the ability to tell a story through rhythm and to tell a story through the music of language is a style of storytelling that has gone, I think, underappreciated. And I think that's why poetry has lost a lot of popularity in recent years, because it's grown into this sort of like academic, back and forth, head smashing discussion, when it should be something that humans can do around a campfire to sit and connect with one another. And that's what I think your work does. So
thank
for
you
anybody
for
in the
that.
audience, I recommend you read Larry's work. Come talk to me about it, because I have a lot of favorites.
Cool. And and I would say that narrative impulse, and that as told through the music of language is abundantly clear in your book Ivy, which we're looking for a publisher.
Well, thank you very much. But speaking for you as someone who's a poet and a songwriter, how do you differentiate between a poem and a song when you're writing it?
Yeah, less and less. So in the beginning, I had a clear distinction in that, to me, a song was like a brief effusion that could be set to music, and that was it. And kind of like the songs I grew up in the 50s listening to. And but then as the influence of Dylan started to hit, showing that you could write poetry and sing it, that changed things. And then so slowly, I started to make more literary poems, although more literary songs, I should say. And then finally, after Buckley's death, I devoted myself to making each song a successful song and a successful poem at the same time.
I think that shines through. I mean, even in your time collaborating with Tim Buckley, that's how I discovered your work. I was listening to Goodbye and Hello, and fell so deeply in love with the lyrics, and felt like I was seeing my own voice reflected back at me.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Which is what inspired me to reach out to you. And what was so exciting is because you are telling stories in all of these songs, and like they're trippy and they're weird too, in a way that appeals to my hippie sensibilities. I'm sure the sensibilities of the time, but you say that every song that you were writing post that collaboration became literary and became a story. I think you were doing that
it's interesting
before as well.
Sure. In the best of them, let's say. Yeah.
Now, on the subject of music, can we talk Song of the Siren for a moment? Perhaps your most enduring work?
I don't know about that. But
we don't We don't have to. We don't have to. But it was. I mean, I think it's a breathtaking piece.
It's an interesting song, and I understand its power. I don't have a lot to say about it, although it is really interesting in that there's so much in such a short song. It talks about the past, it talks about the present, and then it talks about the future. So all of time is wrapped up in it. These characters, the speaker and the siren, seem to evolve through it in a real whole way. And then it doesn't hurt that it was set to the perfect melody and chords.
Certainly does not hurt.
Yeah.
But I said the word enduring, not necessarily best or strongest, but the one that it feels like the most other artists have latched onto and decided to take their own variations on.
Yeah, that's true now, but 50 years from now, things are going to be different.
I dare say there will be.
You'll live to see the day. Okay.
Is there a piece of work that you've done that you expected more from, that you expected to be picked up in the way Song of the Siren was?
Yeah, and here we're verging on a interesting territory, and that is that I don't think about the audience ever. Not before, during, or after I write anything.
Oh, amazing.
So if I'm sitting down to write Sonnet 70, I'm thinking about the internal structure of the art, of the music of the first line and the last line, and the illusions embedded in the text, and strange inspirations that I'm also getting that I write down and may incorporate. That's my whole thought process. I don't even know who the audience is. The audience is the human race, and they're all different. Each one is different. I can't make them into a voting block and please them. I'm just incapable of thinking that way. So I'm free, and I'm also unknown still.
Well, you are more known than you would think.
Maybe.
But I mean, that right there is, I think, a nugget of wisdom that any artist should take at no matter what stage in their career they're at, is to be creating work for you and to create work as a testament to yourself and in conversation with the other pieces of work that came before you. And I think that fame and money are such a death knell to any artist. And
yeah,
I've developed an interesting perspective on that because, living in modern Los Angeles, and I work at a Hollywood management and production company where I'm seeing the commercialization, the commodification of art at a very in-depth day-to-day level. And I came out to LA to be a screenwriter, a comedy writer.
Yeah.
And my poetic practice was born out of a desire to do something other than feed into this commercial machine.
Yeah.
And so what you just said about creating for oneself and creating for the sake of creation is a lesson that I have had to learn through a lot of self-imposed tortured artist genuflection. It's been like, what are we doing this for? Why do we want to? What is the importance of art, or this form of art that is poetry, that is niche It's
Yeah.
because we love it.
I feel that one really powerful connection between your work and mine is that you could say that each piece is written to be performed.
Mm.
That is not to lie on a page. The words on the page are like a score that's to be performed by the musician.
Mm.
And that when I read your stuff, I picture you rapping it out in a club. You know, it's not on a page. It's in my ear.
Wow. Well, I mean, I appreciate that, and I feel much the same about your work. And a lot of what I am now trying to incorporate into my own work after reading yours is stuff that I was doing kind of intangibly. It's just like, I like writing like this. I like writing with this rhythm, with this idea of imagery and location. And what you've done in Song of the Siren, especially in your what's the section called? It's apologies, All American. You write a lot of poems that are very frenetic, and it feels very timely and like you are in the room where you are speaking them as you're reading them, and transports you to the great American bar scene and highways in the middle of the night and walking down the beach. And I think that is something that's often overlooked in poetry right now too, is that it is trying to show you what emotion you should be feeling rather than dropping you into a situation that allows you to feel that emotion for yourself.
Yeah. I don't know what Lou's talking about. There's an essay on the great romantic poem and one of the qualities that is there defined is and I'm talking about now Keats, Shelley, and Wordsworth and people like that, is that their poems always take place in a particular place at a particular time of year. It's very much like the season words in a haiku. You get a feeling of reality. It's grounded on earth. It's not some series of heavenly words.
Yeah. And I think that's
something that I just inherited, I think, from reading the Romantics and without it was by the time I started to question what I was doing was too late. This is the way I write all the time. Song or sonnet.
So is there, I think we touched on this a little bit the last time we spoke, but I'd love to ask again. What is your process? What is your do you sit and write poetry? Do you wait for inspiration to strike, or do you have to go somewhere and or go deep into your own mind and memory to pull from stuff? How do you find that muse?
Yeah, and the process has changed over the years. The latest process is not to be believed, but one principal aspect that I learned early was to have a number of projects going ahead at the same time. So a translation project, a sonnet, a madrigal, and a psalm. And then on a given day, and I don't wait around for inspiration. If inspiration comes, that's great. If not, then it has to be made up by hard work, which is more slow. But then I would turn to each of the four projects, and then whichever one seemed to be sparking, then work on that one and let the other one. So let it work on the one that's most natural to work on, that seems to be moving ahead. And like I said, not wait for inspiration necessarily, but augment it with, if it's not there, with hard work, which can bring writing up to a level near or at inspired levels.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
And I do wait for unexpected messages, like when starting a sonnet, I'll just kind of cover the page in different with different words in different places that just seem to me to be starting to cohere. There's not even a whole sentence, maybe just part of a phrase, or then that links into another phrase. That's all I got. And then eventually I pull it together into a 14-line stanza. But it kind of leaves the door open for inspiration. And then I've been working, Yeats said that the only real poetry is the poetry that comes from the unconscious. And I've been working for decades to open the door to the unconscious. So if I get on a bus, I'm not really usually necessarily reading a book or looking around. I'm daydreaming to such a point that I can almost see the sea of unconsciousness. And see what's lurking there. And now in my older age, it seems to have reached a point where whole things come to me. I was reading the lyric called "The Song," which is at the end of the book "Song of the Siren." I was reading an anthology of poetry, as I do every morning without fail, for 20 minutes or so, like 10 pages of poetry. I was reading an anthology of modern American poetry just so I could say that I've read all these people. I kind of see where they're coming from, what they are contributing. And I was reading a poet I especially loathe and despise.
I think that, to interject, I think the sign of a real poet is hating other poets.
Yeah. I think Dylan Thomas, they asked him if he read modern poetry. He said, why would I do that? You know, either they stink, in which case, why am I reading their poetry? Or they're great, and they put me to shame. Again, a negative experience. Why bother? So I'm reading this awful stuff, and just to get through it, say I've been there, can criticize it with some authority. And an entire song came into my mind. This song it's titled "The Song." That whole thing, I thought, well, okay, and I put the book away and got my manuscript out, which is right to hand, and wrote it out. You can see, I can show you the page. There's nothing. There's no rewrites. There's no revision, and I'm a fiend for revision, but not if it's already perfect.
It just struck like lightning.
Somebody else wrote this song in the angelic spheres
Just threw it into your
and
head.
transmitted it to me. You know, angels are messengers. Let's remember that. Well, they're talking to me. They're saying, here's a perfectly fine song. Why don't you write it down? And I'm not going to say no.
I mean, I feel much the same way. I've had similar experiences.
Is that right?
I feel like, oh,
Yeah.
absolutely,
It's
absolutely.
an
And
electrifying experience, and that's when you know you're really living right.
And that's why I've stuck with it, and that's why I've kept doing it, because it's the closest thing I've found to God. Like
it's
I'm an
ecstatic.
esotericist. It is.
I mean, for the long poems in American Cycle, like I remember to this day, I didn't plan out the cycle, so I'd be done with Chief Joseph, and I'd be wondering, you know, what am I going to do next? I don't know what I'm going to do next. And then I was in a bookstore, no longer there, in downtown Portland, and was just wandering through 19th century biographies or something. And there's a 2-volume biography of P.T. Barnum. And I'm picking it out. And then this whole vision, an ecstatic vision of the final poem, 120 pages long, came to me in that bookstore while I'm holding that book. And it's really, and feels like an orgasm, really.
It does.
And it's a fantastic experience to have. One of the great rewards of being an artist is that sensation that's happened a number of times to me. And I don't really want to go into a major project without having had an experience like that, because it endorses the idea that everything's lined up inside me to do this. I'm the right person to write this poem. Yeah.
I feel much the same way, and like that's the way that a lot of my, you know, I've had several full-length poems spring to life like that. And what I've tried to make a practice of in my own writing is to put myself in a position for inspiration to strike.
Yeah.
And I do most of my writing every night. I take a walk around my neighborhood, and you know, I recognize my privilege in being able to do that, because I'm a 5'10" white man built like a truck. Like, not a lot of people can do a 10 p.m. walk around their neighborhood. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. And I just carry a journal with me. And I live right off Sunset Boulevard, where there's a lot of action, a lot of stuff's going on. So, you know, I can see an overturned trash can, and that can stir some other kind of feeling with me. And all of a sudden I have 2 stanzas in my head. Or, you know, I pull so much from just being outside, and I feel like,
it's partly the oxygen getting to the brain. I did that when I was composing Blue Ridge. Now, Blue Ridge wasn't based on an existing story or an existing life. It was made up in whole cloth. And the way I did it was, I had a general idea of the arc of the narrative, but working out scene by scene, I didn't know when I finished a scene what the next scene was going to be. I didn't plan it like that, and I let it happen. And it was a time in my life where I worked downtown, came home on the bus, and then walked about a mile to my house. And during that walk, I would meditate on the next scene, not trying to force it. And almost every single time, the whole scene came to me. I was fine. I don't know how that works, but it can be made to work.
Yeah. For me, it's allowing myself to create passively, because when you're thinking so much, when you're so dialed in and really trying to make something work in the moment, you are not allowing the space for those thoughts to develop organically. You have to be able to be moving your body, to be letting your mind wander, and draw this sort of like this passive inspiration from the world around you. And it might not necessarily hit you like an angel, which is amazing when it does, but like it will affect you in smaller ways, whether it's seeing a leaf that's like, oh my God, that reminds me of the way that her hair fell on her shoulders when I had that hair with her.
That's beautiful. Okay, I got a question here from Laura. What does it take to get to that point where other people write for you? What does that mean?
You say other people that wrote for you. You know,
oh, get the angels to compose for me and then send it to me?
Yeah. Yes.
I think it has to do with with opening the door to the unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Over the years, it can eventually be swung wide. And
that's very heartening for me to hear, because I have these moments in my youthful rage and vagrancy that I just smash through the door and get this glimpse of the infinite beyond, and am overwhelmed by it. And I see this unbelievable capacity of the human mind to create anything from nothing, and sort of being confronted with your own position within this grander space of infinite creation is incredibly daunting, and makes me feel like a minnow in the ocean, right? It's like there's only so much that this vessel can do to tap into this, and
you never know.
You never know, and so much of the artist's practice,
in the way where your vision will take you,
and the way that you can sustain an artistic practice throughout your life, is figuring out how to siphon the infinite into the immediate, and be able to not be overwhelmed by the weight of it, while still keeping that door open, being able to peek through the cracks.
Yeah.
If you have any advice on how to do that, I would be incredibly grateful for it.
I'll think about it. Daydreaming is huge.
I love daydreaming. You should see me at work.
You call it work. So I hope I've come up with some timeless wisdom, because your whole when you posted the promo for this on Facebook, suggested that they should tune in to hear my timeless wisdom and your hideous vulgarity. See, now I see what you're doing there. You're completely sandbagging me, because if I don't say something timeless and wise in the next half hour, then people are going to think I'm just another doofus. Whereas your bar is so low, hideous vulgarity, if you say one intelligent thing, people are going to love you.
Well, I've yet to say an intelligent thing. That's the problem.
Thanks
I'm still clawing my way out of the dungeon. Well, I think wisdom flows from you like a spigot in the yard. It's incredible in the way it comes out. And it might not feel like wisdom to you, but to me, who's hanging on your every word, it very much does. And you have a level of knowledge and study in this field that I have yet to attain. So even in hearing you talk about your inspirations and talk about the way that other writers have influenced you is wisdom for me. And I'm only so enlightened in this space, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience know their own varying degrees, and there's always wisdom that can be taken from an artistic conversation, regardless of the groundbreakingness of it.
Can I jump in on that? Okay, yes. So I think that's a fascinating point you bring up, Larry, right? So earlier in the conversation, almost at the beginning, you were talking about how poetry brings forth truth, and then you went all the way back to Homer, right? And one of the things that in our almost weekly meetings, Larry, that you bring up is how poetry is truth. And I feel like there's a point for the two of you to discuss between the vulgarity and the wisdom, right? That is exactly that, where we are at a and I'm guessing we've always felt as a species like we're at a crossroads, but I feel like we're at a particular crossroads right now. And I'm just old enough to recognize that we were at a similar crossroads, I believe, back in the 60s, early 70s, where, because you're older, Larry, where you were you were able to recognize that same crossroads then. And I'm wondering what role do you feel that poetry played in telling the truth of those times? What role could it be playing, or maybe it even is playing at this time to help us resolve some of those conflicts?
Hmm.
I'll take my my answer off the air.
Yeah, well, that's one thing, and this is going to sound like advice, but I find that writing about things that happened yesterday, that you haven't had, the writer hasn't had time to integrate the a deep understanding or a deep impression of what. Oh, they're back. About 10 years later, that integration has occurred, and when you come to write about it, you write with inimitably more power. So that while popular song in this, especially with weighty lyrics in the 60s, did paint a picture and help to turn the ethos of the country around, like a hating war, for example. I don't know. I think this is poetry being put to a use that it may, in telling the truth, that's a complicated thing. You could actually, and part of the vision of American Cycle is that by telling the truth of the past, you then can understand what's going on now. By implication, I don't have to draw the parallels. They're abundantly clear. Like how our country is haunted by the loss of the Native American cultures. Their ghosts are still there. That hasn't been exorcised. So, and that explains part of what's going on. So I think that journalism may do a better job, especially when well written, of triggering changes. It may be films and photographs, not writing, that do the trick, but yes. And a poetry is a witness. And there's all kinds of poetry. I'm not going to rule out poetry that wrote about something that happened yesterday. It could be a masterpiece. It just rarely is.
As someone who is, drawing a lot of inspiration from the 60s and the 70s and the political art of the time, I've been trying to write a bunch of anti-fascist songs lately. I've
Yeah,
been cooking up a
fantastic.
bunch of them. And to your point, whenever I finish one and I review it, I look at it and I say, yeah, but we know all this. I haven't had the time to see how this horrific moment in our history is folding into the grander scheme of myself as a part of it, of the future, of the past, and there's a intense weight. And I think maybe it's just me, but many artists right now are trying to come to terms with the radically horrific world that we're living through, and the fact that so much work can be shared instantaneously throughout the world, I think is incredible, and I think is a treasure. The fact that I could write the song and post it, and it could go viral and TikTok, and everybody could see it tomorrow. But at the same time, I think that has also done so much damage to artistic staying power. Like I look at indomitable words from the 60s and 70s, work from Dylan, work from Phil Oakes, people who were really fighting back against the power players of that time. And maybe you could speak to this as someone who lived through that era. Was there as much resistance from the other side to these revolutionary artists as there is today?
Resistance to the artists?
Yeah, I feel like
no.
because
What
of
happened
how-
was that the example of Dylan getting a #2 hit with Like a Rolling Stone, that kind of turned the corner. People realized the thing is that people in the recording industry are interested in making money.
Sure.
They don't care what you're talking about.
No, I mean more so than in the artistic industry of it all. I mean, like, if you go on TikTok today, if you go on Instagram, whatever it may be,
Yeah,
you will see just as many pieces of work from the exact opposite ideology.
really pro-fascist.
Oh my God, yeah. People
Holy crap.
love fascists right now. It's ridiculous.
I'm spared seeing that stuff.
And it's awful, and it's overwhelming. And I think that's why poetry is particularly powerful right now, because poetry is inherently
it's interesting. It's an interesting comment, because I would definitely say in the 60s that the counterculture was the one with the voice.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them were the silent majority. And they all as their sons came home in coffins, they all changed, but they didn't say a thing either way, either before or after. All the artistry was on the part of the counterculture, which I've never thought of that before, but yeah.
It's very, I mean, like I was saying, it's amazing that a piece of art could be broadcast immediately to the entire world and everybody could see and they could love it. But at the same time, it is so easy to get drowned out in the morass of this digital wasteland that we throw so much of ourselves into. And it's become a bit of a cesspool of far right ideologies, far left ideologies, whatever ideology you ascribe to, but they are all put out there and they're all muddled together into this sort of incomprehensible morass of ideologies. But I think that the way around that is through community building and is through.
Okay, so here's something I'd like to interject, and that is, this is the Brando paradox. Marlon Brando, one of my heroes, maybe the best actor who ever lived, and he thought acting was bullshit, and he thought more and more, and that's why when he won an Academy Award, he had a Native American woman read a protest speech rather than accept the award. But he was wrong. Acting is not bullshit. Art is not bullshit. And the thing is that the experience of the person who's partaking in the work of art. In order to do that successfully, they have to use their imagination. No matter whether it's a painting, a piece of music, a poem, or a novel, or a play, or a film. They have to use their imagination to connect to the heart of the work. And each time they do that, their imagination, like a muscle, becomes stronger. But imagination is the muscle that powers empathy. You can, when you hear the story of someone's plight, you imagine what it must feel like. That is a much more powerful situation than just knowing. You are now feeling along with them, and now your sense of empathy comes alive, and you want to help them. That's natural. So that every person in the world partaking of every work of art is actually promoting empathy through imagination. And
it's beautiful.
That's world changing.
That's incredible. That is, when you said you had no wisdom to share, that was a gorgeous thing that you just said.
Okay.
Are you put it in the bank, and now I'm going to say something incredibly off-putting.
Thank you.
Are you have you found any modern art, whether it be poetry, whether it be song, that is affecting your imagination to that empathetic degree?
Oh yeah. I swim in a world of that stuff. The epic novels of Thomas Pynchon, the poetry of Charles Wright, the painting of Richard Devencorn, the music of Philip Glass, let's say.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. I heard Koyaanisqatsi and never looked back. I even know all kinds of really cogent criticisms that destroy the entire point of his music. Doesn't matter. I love it anyway. I don't care. There's something else going on that we have to account for. So.
Yeah, I think that's, I think a part of your taste is your desire for knowledge. You're clearly someone who seeks out art and seeks out a literary experience and a connected human experience. And oh Lord, I wish there were more people like you. especially in today's day and age, where attention spans they're ruined. They've been destroyed.
Yeah, that is a good point. No, a lot of poetry is really short, though, so it's good for sure.
That's true. That's true. Speaking of short poetry, are you familiar at all with like the modern trend of Insta poetry? Not
really. No, what's that?
Oh, that's fine. You should keep it that way. It's a way that poetry has been presented for the digital age, which I am personally not a fan of. I find it to be just trite. Often, and that's not to say that it all is, but many times it's these sort of like catchy, almost like inspirational slogan style buzzwords that people will just throw up.
Is there a form?
Not necessarily. Not. I can't even say that there is a form. It'll be, two two sentences with strange indentations for the sake of looking like a poem.
Yeah.
And I'm very conflicted about how I
that's
feel
true.
about it, because on the one hand, as someone who reads a lot of poetry and is a fan of works from all sorts of time periods, I find it to be not necessarily good poetry. But on the other side, for the digital age, for a world that has gotten so massively overconnected, I hope that it can serve as a way to lead people into deeper understandings of poetry.
Yeah.
So
There's that purpose in bad
Hmm.
art. Bad art can pull you in, and over the years, and then and you eventually get tired of it, and but long for something along the same lines, only better.
yeah.
And so your taste improves and you get deeper into masterpieces.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
there's a place for it in the world.
I like to think of it as like popcorn poetry.
Yeah.
It's like it's junk food in a lot of ways, but junk food is important in to whatever degree it is.
Yeah.
Oh, Lou's back.
Yeah, I'm back. So, boy, I really love that. I love that answer, Larry. I love the question. I love the answer, and I love the idea that people have to start somewhere, and there's a progression you have to make, and it's always going to be
Yeah.
awkward when you start. But if you don't start in that awkward spot, you'll never get to the point where you have understanding.
Well, I mean, we really started with 1-2 buckle my shoe. I mean, we've made some progress since then.
A hell of a rhyme.
Was that Homer? Was that Homer who did
Yeah,
that?
I think that was Homer.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was Jethro. I don't know.
Man, I just want to jump back to something you said, Larry, because like this is a quote that I'm going to put up on my wall. I've got a small wall here of quotes that I put up to remember, because I don't have a great memory, because I'm almost as old as you, Larry. But imagination is the muscle that powers empathy.
Yeah.
I think is such a beautiful thought,
So
and it kind of makes me angry, um, in that it makes me wonder, Larry. Like, have you said that before, or did you
No.
just come out with that?
Oh, I've thought it, but I haven't really talked about it.
Oh God, that's so smart.
wow, you have a lot of really
Thank
interesting
you.
ideas. Have you ever thought about writing them down?
Yeah. In what context?
Yeah, no, I do love that. So with that idea, with the idea of imagination being the muscle that powers empathy, do you guys have any imagination you want to share with us? Any poetry you want to share?
Heck yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so how do you want to do this? I understand that August, you have a poem to share, and Larry, you have a poem to share, and then August, you, if I read the text correctly, you want to share both one of your poems, but then you want to recite one of or perform one of Larry's poems as well. Is that correct?
I would love to, if you'd be willing to let me embody his words for a moment. It would be my pride and pleasure.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. You good with that, Larry?
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
then
why
give
don't
me
you go first with yours?
perfect. I'm gonna mute out and then
Great. This
With
is
with your poem. Then I'll do mine, and then you do mine.
amazing. Sounds good. I will read a poem called Frostbitten Friend. This is a poem from my book Ivy. It was originally published by Hare's Paw Literary Journal. I recommend you check them out. They're doing some very fun stuff. And this is a poem that I particularly enjoy because it was one that was born from a moment of that angelic inspiration. I was down back home on Long Island. I live right by the bay, and it was a cold winter's night, and I was going through a horrendous breakup that racked my mind for a little over 2 years. Word to any viewers out there, I'm crazy. But this one, but I was thinking about that. I was thinking about her, and I was just in the winter air, and this just came to me all of a sudden. I wrote it instantaneously, so I figured I'll share it. It starts like this: Frostbitten friend. I found you on the mountain, my lost, frostbitten friend, shivering in your nightgown, battered by the wind. I knelt down beside you there, a glove to lift your chin. My shoulders heaved alive, and I became a palanquin. I struggled to understand as frostbite kissed your hands, how you moved gently as a snowflake when it lands. The hearth fire of my cabin gave you a summer glow, yet you looked beyond me, toward the rain and snow. I placed upon the stovetop a kettle made of tin, poured us cups of lukewarm tea as you began to sing, of ghostly repetitions in verses of your life and how you came to be marooned out on the ice. We offered each inch of us to share a lonely night. Pierced was my hungry heart by your frostbit knife. I held you so close to me, drank the breath you did draw, thinking my lukewarm tea would help your body thaw. As the last embers crackled, the mourning dove took flight. One shadow stung my wall in that first empty light. I loved you from a distance, as autumn loves the spring, bisected by frozen hands too cold for rings. I hope I made you happy. I hope I kept you warm. At the least, I hope I sheltered you from the storm. For you gave me your spirit. You sang to me your song. You never held on as you melted through my palm. I moved far from the mountain, built up a brand new den. Yet, on some winter nights, my fingers freeze again. And that doesn't mean I miss you. That doesn't mean you win. But I won't forget you, my lost frostbitten friend.
Thank
That was
you,
the first
August.
poem I ever wrote publicly, and I was shaking like a leaf the entire time.
Yeah. I became palanquin. Is that the line?
It is.
That's one of the best lines I've heard in recent years. And I have to say, poetry is in good hands with you, August.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you very much for listening and for inspiring it and serving as a roadmap that I didn't even know that I needed.
Okay, here we go.
Is that product placement, Larry? Because we're going to have to charge you for that.
That's fine. I can pay. Thorn and Rose. I heard you play the Song of Songs once on your disillusioned lute. Out of the windows of the moon, I had to shoot. Why was I ever born? I asked the thorn. Heaven only knows, answers the rose. I rode Apollo, and in vain. Not you, only the desolate shore. I wavered like the light of earth in the old war. Why are the waters torn? I asked the thorn. Because the white moon glows, answers the rose. Though the moon is in memory, the smoke of kisses is returning. Oh, to the alphabet of fire, and I am burning. Why am I made to mourn? I ask the thorn. We love what comes and goes, answers the rose. Thank you.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And so much of what I love about your work is that it is accessible. It touches on matters of the heart. It touches on matters of fate and of life beyond ourselves. And it is spoken in a meter and in a language that
Yeah.
anyone can attend to. And I think that is the most important thing that poetry can do today. It's be something for people to listen to and connect with. Really.
That was
It's
partly
moving
inspired by what I consider the most beautiful song ever written. And Siren may be a candidate, but for me, the winner is La Belle Dame Sans Merci by John Keats, who's writing in what's known as the Sapphic meter, which is a 4-line stanza with 3 lines. This is kind of technical, but it has 3 longer lines and then 1 really short line. And if you read La Belle Dame, you'll see what I'm talking about. The last line kind of pulls the rug out from under you every time. It just shoots this energy of like something is lost, something is missing, and conveys it with the music of the rhythm. We're not even talking about the rhymes yet. And he uses it, Keats uses it to extraordinary effect throughout this piece. And after I read it, well, not only did I vote it the best song of all time, but I had to find some way, some day of using that stanza successfully there. And I didn't read you the runners up. They're not even in the book. They didn't make it, but that one did. I thought, okay, that's got the sound.
It's a beautiful piece. It's amazing. And I'm, again, not just because you booked me to talk with you on World Poetry Day, but this is a really phenomenal book, Song of the Siren. I highly recommend everybody in the audience pick up a copy. I think it's really, really powerful, and your work is inviting and impeccable at the same time.
Thank you so much.
Frankly. Sue me, call me crazy. Yeah, if I can read another one of your pieces from Song of the Siren, I would love to. And this is actually interesting. I'm going to read your piece, Wild Roses, and it's very funny how it connects thematically to the 2 pieces we each just read. This is Wild Roses. It was in another winter, not long after it snowed. A bus was shifting down on a blue southern road. Wild roses long and stem and leaf and daisies, oh, but they are brief. Old man at the window with a heavenly bouquet. A girl across the aisle who could not look away. Wild roses long and stem and leaf and daisies, oh, but they are brief. You love the flowers, he said, and the flow of the sap. My wife would like for you, and laid them in her lap. Wild roses long and stem and leaf and daisies, oh, but they are brief. She smiled and sighed and dreamed of blossoms when you marry. Watched him get off and walk into the cemetery. Wild roses long and stem and leaf and daisies, oh, but they are brief. I think it's gorgeous.
Wow, thank you.
And so much in this book is just the passage of a life, the reflections on memory, the allusions to nature and love and death and birth, all put into this beautifully rhythmic lyric verse. It's great. I want to write like that.
Thank you. Did a beautiful job, as always.
Oh, thank you, sir.
So are we wrapping this thing?
No, Larry, we've got 15 minutes. You've got to just give us 15 more minutes of wisdom before we can call this. I know, before we can call it a world poetry night, I guess.
Really? Okay.
You know, can I?
Here's one thing I wanted to talk about. A couple of things. Well, one is that I think that being a modern American, contemporary American poet is an act of rebellion.
Yeah, me too.
I feel comfortable with rebellion because if you look on the TV, there's no poetry. There's wrestling just about every night of the week.
Well, wrestling is a form of poetry.
No, it isn't. Okay.
Wait. I wish I could mute you, Larry. I want to hear August. Hang on. I want to hear this argument that wrestling is poetry.
First of all, you're a pencil neck geek.
Says the guy who hates wrestling. Talking about
says Al Cap.
Actually, a song by a wrestler. So, yeah, I mean, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be a different way. The poetry is more important than newspapers and more engaging than wrestling, and true instead of fake also. So there's that.
What, Larry? May I?
Yeah.
Like okay, so like you're saying it's more true than what'd you say than journalism? What'd you say?
Yes.
Okay, like I think it can be, but I think this is sort of the exact issue that I feel like the two of you have brought up, and it's honestly the reason that I thought it would be so interesting to put these two generations of poets separated, I would argue, because you're really old, Larry, by another middle generation together. Yeah.
Bringing a folding chair into the room.
Yeah, well, hey, sure. What exactly? Thank you. But like so August, you pulled out Insta poetry as the shame, right? And Larry is and Larry is saying that poetry is more important than journalism. And so it makes me wonder where those two things, that poetry is truth, which, I accept, and then Insta poetry isn't truth. How do you bridge that? Because I really do feel like we're at a time, and again, I recognize that we've probably always been in this time, but I feel like we're at a time where we need to figure out the solution. And truth is always the solution. And if poetry is the truth, well, how can Insta poetry become the solution? I'm going to take this answer off the air while I drink more mezcal.
I can talk on this. I think Insta poetry is truth. It's not necessarily a truth that I ascribe to in my heady ivory tower of metered verse, but it is truth nonetheless. And that sort of circles back to what I touched on in the beginning of this talk, where I said there's no such thing as bad poetry. And after reading more poetry, that changed. But that's because that opinion changed within myself. I still hold true to the belief that there is no such thing as bad poetry if it is written to be truthful, if it is written with that poetic truth. And I think Insta poetry, is written in that poetic truth. And me, as I've gotten more into poetry and have read more and have, agreed with the academics on what is and isn't a quality poem, I have formed my own ingrained opinions, but that does not need to invalidate any other form of poetry. I think that it's a very subjective thing. All poetry is good and all poetry is true, and it's down to the reader to figure out how true and how good it is for them.
I do find that in times of great stress that people reach out to poetry. So, for example, after 9/11, everybody wanted to hear Hands by Jewel. for the lyric over and over. It was like helping them to cope. But it's really they're really two different tracks. The track of politics and political violence and so on, and the track of great art. They don't have a direct connection. They're somewhat independent. I think we really wish that art could fix things, but I think what it does is stand as a witness, and then the human race can do what it wants now that it knows the reality.
Oh, you gotta respond to that, August, because you're that next generation where I really I hear that, and I think that's a beautiful thought from somebody who is of a generation where you feel like maybe things aren't going in the direction you want them to, and I certainly.
But that's all going to change. The thing is that, and that's the other thing I was going to say is that. We need to let time settle out these things. You know, the most famous poet in the English language in the 18th century, Abraham Cowley. Ever heard of him? Ever read a single goddamn line he wrote?
Yeah, I got a poster of him right over here.
You're a liar.
No, I'm a poet. Everything I say is true.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yeah. So, in the 19th century, also, it was all Wordsworth and Whittier and stuff like that. And then, but the secret underground poets came. Whitman and Dickinson came, and even though they were unpublished in their own lifetimes, I mean, he published his own. He self-published. She published not at all. And yet, by the 20th century, 100 years later, we figured out, those are the chief poets of the 19th century. There you go, man. So you have to let time settle these things. Time settles out politics. The fascist dictators are eventually overridden. Meanwhile, art goes on in its beautiful course.
God, so I'm looking at the comments here, and Stephen Beckett wrote,
"My brother."
Beckett. Sorry, didn't even realize. I guess that shows you what the younger generation is paying attention to. Anyway, so your brother wrote, "Poetry will still be here in 400 years as it is now," and I think about the Mayans. The Mayans, when you so literally the number 400 to the Mayans was infinity. When we say like I got a million things to do, they would say in a different language, I got like 400 things to do, which to me suggests it's infinite.
Yeah,
I think it's the most enduring art form that can be. I'm not sure whose quote it was, but it was a damn good quote about writing being work in time and visual arts being work in space. And when you track back to the first inceptions of art in our human development, you have cave paintings and you have poems spoken around the fire.
Yeah.
And at this point, regardless of the insta poetry and the digitization and however our means of communication evolves, at the end of the day, this is genetic. This is ingrained so deeply into the fabric of our beings that Stephen is right. It will go on forever. It will always be here. There might be a nuclear apocalypse, and that would be a shame. But I'm sure that the people with 6 arms and even more legs will be gathering around their waste pits and telling each other stories of the old times in rhyming verse. It's lodged in our brains at this point. And that I think circles back to your theme of truth, in the fact that it is something that can flow from humanity as naturally as breathing and as walking and as drinking. It is something that we always develop into.
Oh God, August, I love that. And I just want to throw on top of that, and I think I can maybe get us to the next 3.5 minutes by asking Larry to speak to that ultimate truth, which I really believe the ultimate truth is always love, by reciting his poem, "I Love a Waitress," which is as simple and as true as anything I've ever read.
Yeah, okay. A request. Sound better with piano. Okay. I love a waitress. I love a waitress. She's working late. She says she loves me. I wait and wait. I guess I'm easy. I won't pretend. She's like the daylight at winter's end. It's only me joking around with Don Quixote while Lord Jim's opening up a 6-pack of beer. Odysseus wants to watch an old movie tonight, and David Copperfield's looking for a storybook. Huck Finn's hoping to learn to play ragtime piano, and Robinson Crusoe's boning up on his algebra. Hamlet's at the desk, grinding out a good sonnet. And Sherlock Holmes is here, untangling it all. Oh, I could dance like a dolphin, but it's no fun. Now she doesn't come home when her shift is done. I love a waitress. She's working late. She says she loves me. I wait and wait. I guess I'm easy. I won't pretend. She's like the daylight at winter's end.
Man, that to me is just a summation of life.
Okay, man. That's not even my current wife, so
Oh,
things have moved on.
Larry, you hound dog.
Well, but I think that literally, okay, as we're at the end here, I think that literally is a beautiful summation of like our great hopes and our dreams, right? And then the reality of life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true.
So my suggestion is we meet here same time, third
Next
Friday of
year.
every month. Next year, third Friday of every month. Come on, Larry.
Wow.
You got something better to do? You're an old guy. Come on.
I can do it. I can hit that.
Yeah, I'll hit it too.
Okay.
It
Hey,
was a real pleasure, you guys.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Lou and Larry, so much for having me. I feel rejuvenated entirely by this conversation, and you're a wise guy, Larry. You are.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was an honor to be here with you guys. I really appreciate it. Anybody interested in August poems, like he's got this new collection coming out, so watch for it. Follow him on Instagram. What's your Instagram, August?
It's at normal August, one word. If you check me out there, I post a lot of poetry, a lot of my readings, a lot of my songs. I do comedy too. It's a
Right on. We'll meet at the comedy clubs in Burbank.
Please. We'll have ourselves a wild night.
Man, and yeah, and if you're interested in Larry, just go over to Amazon. He's got a bunch of books already available. American Cycle is 800 pages of wisdom that I think you can learn a lot from. And man, like he's got this album coming out. Have you heard this, August?
No.
I haven't heard the new one. No.
Oh man, I gotta tell you, like I've never been a guy who help me out, Larry. What's the French dude, Brel?
It's the songs of Jacques Brel.
Yeah, man.
It's called
Like
Though We Have Only Love.
he's taken all of these songs that we thought we knew that were originally written in French, and he translated them accurately into English, which they had never been done, and performed them with a friend of
Yeah.
his over in Europe. Absolutely beautiful music.
Amazing.
Like just like if this is the stuff you enjoy, lock it in, check it out, and then come back the third Friday of every month, and we'll just be hanging out here, right here.
Amazing.
All right.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Well, thank you so
Thanks.
much. Thank you all for tuning in as well.
Well, that went a lot better than I thought it would.